Hey y'all, welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about church. Okay? We are talking about church. That is something that I have struggled with for a long time with going to church, not going to church. As a child, I was forced to go to church. And then when I went to college, I went to church here and there. I couldn't really get into church, I would say. I mean, granted, the church that I grew up in, that kind of set my foundation, but it was just like I still felt like church was not for me. And I have visited and gone to so many different churches over my lifetime, and I never found one that quite fit until I started reading the word for myself and realized that church, that is not of the Most High. It's not. And so, with my struggles with going to church, I stopped going to church in 2024. It was the last time that I have been to a Sunday church. I will say that, a Sunday church. Now, I have been to a place of worship on Shabbat, and I was going there for a while. And then I stopped because some of the beliefs that they have didn't quite line up with scripture. So I no longer go to church. And then I was talking to a friend, and she was talking about, doing a lesson on church. And I was like, I had already planned to do this lesson, but I was like, no, I really need to do it. I really need to go ahead and do this lesson on church. Where does it come from? Why do people go to church? What is it? So let's get into the dictionary definition of church. And this is coming from dictionary.com. So, church is a building for public Christian worship. Mind you, in Christianity, that is the only place that the building is called a church, right? In Catholicism, I believe they call it a cathedral, or they call it Sunday Mass. In other religions, they have like temples, they have synagogues. Now, mind you, temples and synagogues were something that were used in the New Testament. I don't know what other kind of buildings that these other religions, what they call it. They don't call it church, they call it something else. So it's a building for public Christian worship. And it also says public Christian worship of God, a Christian religious service. They attend church regularly. None the church or the church, so they have lowercase and uppercase, the whole body of Christian believers. So people say the church of Yahusha, or the church, well, they say the church of Jesus when they're talking about the body of the Messiah. Sometimes church, any organized group of Christian believers professing the same creed and acknowledging the same ecclesiastical authority, a Christian denomination. So, for example, a Methodist church. And then it gets me to wondering, like, why are there so many Christian denominations? Like, you call yourself a Christian, but then you have Methodist, you have Pentecostal, you have Baptist, you have Episcopalian. I believe that's how it's said. You have Catholic. That's a form of Christianity. You have all these different denominations of Christianity, and it's like, why? For what? Don't y'all all believe the same thing? Y'all call yourselves Christians, but then you have like subgroups. So the thing is, a lot of them have different beliefs. They have different beliefs. They have different rules, which none are rooted in Scripture. That is the part that confuses me. The part of the whole Christian body or of a particular denomination belonging to the same city, country, nation, etc. The African Church was well represented at the International Ecumenical Conference. A body of Christians worshiping in a particular building or constituting one congregation. She is a member of this church. So even though you have like different churches, literally, quite literally on every single corner, they don't all do the same thing. And that is the part that also confuses me. It's just like, but why? Why are they all different? Why do they have these different beliefs? And we're not going to really get into that because this is just about church, where the word comes from, and the origin of it. But if you go to different churches, no two churches do the same thing. That's that's just wild to me. So I went to Google to look up the word church. The word church comes from Old English "ceres." I'm not sure how that's pronounced, which is derived from Germanic roots tracing back to the Greek, meaning of the Lord, likely from oikos, which we're going to get into that word, or house of the Lord. While many languages use words from the Greek meaning called out assembly, English adopted the Germanic term for a place of worship, which developed into church, related to German Kirche or Scots Kirk. To the Greek roots, the ultimate source is Greek, meaning Lord or ruler, and of the Lord. Germanic adoption, this term was borrowed by Germanic peoples, becoming in Proto-Germanic and Old English. The evolution in English evolved into church. I'm not sure if that's pronounced the same way that church is pronounced, and then the modern English church, while its Scandinavian form led to the Scots kirk, right? And we're going to get into that, where that came from. The alternative Greek terms, the New Testament primarily uses meaning assembly or called out ones. I want to say that it is ecclesia, or from which we get ecclesiastical. So yes, ecclesia. So you actually do see that in churches where they speak Spanish. I have seen that. It'll say ecclesia. It's spelled differently. I think it's Eclesia in Spanish, which is church. But in Greek, there's the two Ks. But English uses the Germanic church for both the building and the people. Now, here's the thing. In the word, in Hebrew or Aramaic, there is no word church. That comes from the fact that during the New Testament period, they were under Greek rule. So the Greeks took the Hebrew scriptures, mixed it with Greek pagan rituals, and that's how you get Christianity, that's how you get church. So the primordial emergence. So chaos, the god of chaos, this is Greek mythology. The first entity, a gaping void or emptiness. What does that sound like? In the beginning, Yahweh created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, right? Then you have Mother Earth, who emerged from chaos. Isn't that what Yahweh did? Yes, he did. Then you have the deep abyss beneath the earth also a primordial being, which would be the ocean, right? Be the ocean. Like, do y'all see how this is lining up? They literally stole the scriptures and used their gods to create something completely different. All of this is in Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis, what we're talking about. Eros, the force of love and procreation, sometimes appearing alongside or from chaos. What do Yahweh tell the animals and the people to do? Multiply. Nyx or night and Erebus darkness. Born from chaos, they then produce Aether light and Hemera day. Right? Didn't Yahweh create light and darkness or day and night? He did. So then you have your key takeaways. Chaos was the first, but Gaia, the earth, was the first powerful entity to actively create, giving birth to Uranus, which is the sky, or the heavens, the Shemayim, who then fathered the Titans. So we see a lot of similarities between Greek mythology and the scriptures. But that's where it came from. Because what came first, the scriptures or Greek mythology? The scriptures. That's what Satan does. He imitates. It is all imitation of what the Most High does. Let's get into Norse mythology, okay? This is where church comes from. Odin is the chief deity of the Norse pantheon. Although Odin was worshipped more generally in Germanic paganism, the information we have today about this god is derived mostly from Norse mythology. These pieces of information include both written sources, such as myths, and archaeological finds that combined paint a complex picture of the Norse or Viking god. Consequently, it is difficult to figure out Odin's exact role and character. Nevertheless, in general, Odin is viewed as a wise deity in addition to his role as the Norse god of war. isn't Yahuwah also mentioned as the Elohim of war, right? The Elohim of hosts. Yes, he is an Elohim of war. Copy. Well, not, I wouldn't say copy, I would say imitate, because they can't copy what the Most High does. Apart from that, he was also associated with death, poetry, magic, and prophecy. As the primary god of the Norse pantheon, Odin plays an important role in many myths. And he was also the father of the mighty Thor, who is so loved in modern popular culture for his strength. Think of Thor, Marvel, okay? The Marvel movies, Thor. That's where that comes from. Norse mythology. The thing is, there is nothing created today that has not been imitated or that has not been done before. There is literally nothing new under the sun. It is all repeated or imitated. And nobody knows where this stuff comes from. Nobody does the research. Nobody wants to read. Nobody wants to do the work and put in the time that it takes to learn these things. But this whole thing about church is it's a place of worship. And it means Lord or ruler. So let's talk about church, okay? Now this is coming from G 1577 in the concordance, ecclesia, right? This word stresses a group of people called out for a special purpose. It designated the new society of which Yahushua was the founder, being as it was a society knit together by the closest spiritual bonds and altogether independent of space. So if it's independent of space, why is it being held in a building? Now, that is not to say that Yahushua did not go into the synagogues, because he did. He did go in there and he would teach. But the way that the synagogues were structured and the way that church is structured today is not the same. It is completely different. So we can't even really compare the two. Ecclesia, from ek, which means out of, and klesis, a calling, or kaleo, to call, was used among the Greeks of a body of citizens gathered to discuss the affairs of state, which is Acts 19 and 39. And if you have any further complaint, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. Now, my scriptures are coming from the scriptures translation, but if you look at any other translation, more than likely they use the word church. That was not the word that was used in Hebrew. It was assembly. So the Greeks took this assembling and put a name on it and called it church. In Acts 7:38, it is used of Israel in 1932 and 41 of a riotous mob. This is he who was in the assembly in the wilderness with the messenger who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the living words to give to us. Acts 7:38. Then others indeed shouted this, and others that, for the assembly was confused, and most of them did not know why they had come together. And having said this, he dismissed the assembly. Now, for context, you can go and read the whole chapter yourself, but just for the sake of time, I just put the scriptures here that are mentioned in the concordance. To the whole company of the redeemed throughout the present era, the company of which Christ said, I will build my church. Matthew 16:18. That is not what he said. And I also say to you that you are Kepha, and on this rock I shall build my assembly. The thing is, it's not a church. The Christians think that church is the building. Church is not the building. It is not. When he said, I will build my assembly, is the people coming together of like mind. Those who are in the body of the Messiah. They want to use the word church, but it's not church. It's assembly. And which is further described as the church, which is his body. Ephesians 1:22, 5:23. And the singular number, Matthew 18:17. So this is just talking about the spiritual church, but also the physical church. And people like to interchange the two, which you cannot do. Because when it comes to the physical assembly of people gathering together, it does not have to be like in an official building, like in a church. It could be in somebody's home. It could be at a park somewhere, just people gathering together. But in today's time, it's just the whole formality of it, of gathering in a church building. And we're going to get to how Yahweh says that he does not dwell in a house made by man. Because, people go to church and they say they feel the Holy Spirit and they feel, the Most High moving about the room. He is not there. He is not there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So this is coming from G2411, which is Huron. The neuter of the adjective hieros, sacred, is used as a noun denoting a sacred place, a temple, that of Artemis or Diana, which is in Acts 19:27. And not only is this trade of ours in danger of coming to rejection, but also that the temple of the great female mighty one Artemis, whom all Asia and the world worship, shall be regarded as worthless and her greatness diminished. Right? So a sacred place where they go to worship their gods. And now they try to make it to where people go a sacred place, a church, to worship the Most High. But if you think of how churches are constructed today, the last church that I went to, it was a really huge church. And they had, I think, like maybe 3 or 4 campuses. Because I live in Houston. So Houston's pretty big. So they had a couple of different locations. But I attended the largest one, which is where the church was initially founded. And they had a stage, they had a cafe, they built a whole building. A children's church was also dubbed as a Christian school. They have offices, they have all these different types of things. And I'm like, why do we have all this in a church? But it is to appease the masses, to bring more people to come in. If they feel like they can cater to all these different people by having a rock band, by having strobe lights, by having a cafe, by having all these different things, more and more people can come in. They're more so focused on attracting people than delivering the word. And that takes away from what it is to worship the Most High. That in Jerusalem, Mark 11:11, signifying the entire building with its precincts or some part thereof, as distinct from the naos or the inner sanctuary. And Yahusha went into Jerusalem and into the set apart place. And having looked around on all, he went out to Bethania with the 12, as the hour was already late. Apart from the Gospels and Acts, it is mentioned only in 1 Corinthians 9 and 13. So what it is it's a set apart place. The set apart place is where the priests would go, right, to do their priestly duties. And so they're trying to make that as in the word church, but you cannot make the word church and replace the set apart place. Those are two different things. They have nothing to do with each other. Christ taught in one of the courts to which all the people had access. Herein is never used figuratively, so it's always used literally, which means an actual physical building, right? It's not used as in a spiritual sense, it's a physical building. The temple mentioned in the Gospels and Acts was begun by Herod in 20 BC and destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. And then 1 Corinthians 9 and 13, do you not know that those serving the set apart place eat from the set apart place, and those attending at the set apart place have their share of the offerings of the slaughter place? So those who their job is to attend to the set apart place, which is different from, like it was saying, the sanctuary or sacred place of Artemis, this Greek goddess, whoever she was. You can't put those two things together. You cannot put the Most High in the same boat as these fake gods. So getting into that word naos, which comes from G3585, it's a shrine or sanctuary, and it was used among the heathen to denote the shrine containing the idol. Acts 17:24 and 19:24. So again, this is talking about the goddess Artemis. So think of a shrine, right? A shrine is typically seen as, somebody could have a shrine of something that they love the most. Like if they have a favorite singer, and they have on one of the walls in their bedrooms just pictures of this person, it is a shrine. Now, when it comes to talking about these quote unquote sacred places of these gods, they will have in this temple or this building different statues, pictures, depictions of this God. And that is what it is. So it's still a church, but it's a place where they go and worship this God, and they have an altar where they offer offerings to this God or whatnot. So it comes from Acts 17:24, 19:24. Yahweh, who made the world and all that is in it, this one being master of heaven and earth, does not dwell in dwellings made with hands. That is why when it comes to a church building, the Most High is not in there. You may feel a spirit, but it is not the set apart spirit. That is not what you feel in that building, because he is not there. He did not ordain whatever y'all have going on in that church. He is not there. Okay, y'all feel a spirit, but it ain't his. For a certain man named Demetrios, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis. So like I was saying, they make all these kind of statues and things of this god, and they put them in this place, provided no little business to the craftsmen. Among the Jews, the sanctuary in the temple, so it would have been the most set apart place inside the temple, and to which only the priest could lawfully enter. So, for example, Luke 1:9, 21, and 22. According to the institute of the priesthood, he was chosen by lot to burn incense when he went into the dwelling place of Yahuwah. And the people waited for Zechariah and marveled at his delay in the dwelling place. And when he came out, he was unable to speak to them, and they recognized that he had seen a vision in the dwelling place, for he was beckoning to them and remained dumb. So this is when he was given the prophecy that his wife Elizabeth was going to have a child. And he was like, we're old. What are you talking about? Like, how is she going to have a child? Because she was barren. And because of his unbelief, he was struck dumb, so he wasn't able to see anything. But during that time, he was in a dwelling place. If you go to, I believe it's First Chronicles chapter 14, it will list each person, each house, each priesthood of when they're supposed to go into the dwelling place by their month, and you will see what it's referring to in Luke 1 and 9. So assembly, which is oftentimes the word that is used in the Bible, not church, assembly, right? To assemble, to come together. And this is that word that we talked about at the beginning, oikos or oikos, which denotes a house, a dwelling. For example, Matthew 9:6 and 7, 11, and 8. It is used of the tabernacle as the house of the Most High in Matthew 12:4, how he went into the house of Elohim and ate the showbread, which was not right for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. Now, in this context, Joshua was referring to what David did, because Yosha and his disciples, they were out on Shabbat, and they were near the fields and they were eating, and the religious leaders were like, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that on Shabbat. And Yosha told them, what David did in the house of Elohim, even though David was not a priest, he was not even supposed to be in there. That was only for the priesthood. Okay. And the temple, similarly, Matthew 21:13, Luke 11:15, and which they simply say the same. And he said to them, it has been written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. So this is when Yahusha was flipping tables, okay? Because they were in there defiling the Most High's house. Metaphorically of Israel as Elohim's house, Hebrews 3:2 and 5. He was trustworthy to him who appointed him, as also Moshe and all his house. And Moshe indeed was trustworthy in all his house as a servant, for a witness of what would be spoken later. But Messiah as a son over his own house, whose house we are if we hold fast the boldness and the boasting of the expectation firm to end. So this is talking spiritually, being of the Most High's house, being of the body of the Messiah. So this is a spiritual sense, a dwelling place, to dwell in the Most High's house. It also can refer to like a household of a family, or of a local church building. So G3831, we're still talking about assembly. This word panegoris. Panegoris refers to that solemn assembly gathered for festal rejoicing, used in Hebrews 12:23 to represent the church in heaven whose earthly toil and suffering has forever passed away. Now here's my thing. You cannot relate church to heaven. Like that's just something that you can't do that. You can't have, there's no church in heaven. There's an assembly of heavenly creatures, right? There's an assembly of that, but you cannot combine the two. So it says, to the entire gathering and assembly of the firstborn having been enrolled in heaven, and to Elohim, the judge of all, and to the spirits of righteous men made perfect. There's no church in heaven. They just assembled together. So this is what I was talking about. You can't replace words that were used in Hebrew with other words. And this is exactly what the Greeks did to the Hebrew scriptures. And this is why I'm like going over this and going over these words that we use most often, because these words, they're not of the Hebrew. Now, granted, yes, there were Hebrews who did decide to go ahead and follow in this coagulation of the Hebrew scriptures and Greek pagan worship. But when it comes to when this was actually written and who it was actually written by and the language it was written in, you cannot replace it. You cannot just substitute the word, because that changes the whole meaning, especially when it comes to the root of the word that was used to replace it. So now we have synagogue, right, which comes from G4864. Synagogue originally meant just a gathering or bringing together of people, yet in the New Testament, it became specifically the gathering place for the Jews, Jewish proselytes, and Elohim fearers. That is what it was meant to be. The synagogue or assembly is for the Hebrew people. That's what we did. And that's what we're to do now. We are to gather, especially when it comes to the festivals, and we'll get to that in a minute. And when it comes to Shabbat, gather with other people who are also in fear of the Most High. As Hebrew people, we're not supposed to be in these church buildings worshiping whatever God these people are worshiping, whatever God this pastor worships. Because I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10 is not the Most High. We are just to gather amongst ourselves. And it doesn't need to be like a mass gathering, right? Where 2 or 3 are gathered, Yahusha is in the midst. It doesn't have to be this huge gathering, but that is what it is today in the church. It's like a bunch of people in these mega churches. This word means properly a bringing together, sun together, ago to bring, denoted a gathering of things, a collection, then of persons, an assembling of Jewish religious gatherings. So, for example, Acts 9:2. Acts from his letters to the congregations of Damascus, so that if he found any who were of the way, whether men or women, to bring them bound to Jerusalem. An assembly of Christian Jews. I feel like that's an oxymoron. I feel like it is, because you cannot be of Christianity and also be of the belief of the Most High, of the Hebrew scriptures. That's like, me being called African American. I'm not even from Africa. So why am I called African American? That it's an oxymoron. You can't do both. So as in James 2:2, which says, for if there should come into your meeting place a man with gold rings and a splendid robe, and there should also come in a poor one dressed in rags. And you can go ahead and read the rest of that for yourself in your own time. A company dominated by the power and activity of Satan. So Revelations 2:9 and 3:9. I know your works and pressure and poverty, yet you are rich, and the blasphemy of those who say they are Yahudim are not, but are the congregation of Satan. And that is the people over there occupying the country of Israel. See, I am giving up those of the congregation of Satan who say they are Yahudim and are not, but lie. See, I am making them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. By metonymy, the building in which the gathering is held. So Matthew 6:2 and Mark 1:21. Thus, when you do a kind deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do, in the congregations and in the streets. So, whether it's in the actual physical synagogue or on the streets, to be praised by men. Truly, I say to you, they have their reward. The origin of the Jewish synagogue is probably to be assigned to the time of the Babylonian exile. Having no temple, the Jews assembled on the Sabbath to hear the law read, and the practice continued in various buildings after the return back to Jerusalem. Right? So this is mainly the southern kingdom because they were able to return back to their land. But they have these synagogues, these places of worship, because they had no temple. They had no place to go to worship. But the thing is, even in the Old Testament, they didn't go inside of a building. They went to the house of Elohim where the priests were, and they were outside praying and worshiping. They weren't inside the building because they were not allowed to. That was only for the priests. So getting into Hebrew, H4150, Moed or Moad, which means appointed place of meeting. The noun Moad appears in the Old Testament 223 times, of which 160 times are in the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible or the Torah. The word Moad keeps its basic meaning of appointed, but varies as to what is agreed upon or appointed according to the context, the time, the place, or the meeting itself. So it means, for example, if you want to go running with a friend, right? Well, first of all, you have to get the logistics together. Where are y'all going to go running? Where are y'all going to meet? And what time? Is it an appointed time to meet with this person to go running? Because if you don't have those things, how are y'all going to go run together? That doesn't even make sense. Also, appointed would also refer to Yahushua's appointed feasts, the days, when it's supposed to happen, the month, the day, the time of day, because sometimes he'll say at evening. It's supposed to start at evening, from evening to evening. He'll tell you how many days. And even with the Passover, the people were supposed to come to Jerusalem. I believe it was for Passover and for the Feast of Tabernacles. If I'm incorrect, please correct me. But I know for sure that it was for the Feast of Tabernacles that they were supposed to come to Jerusalem, right? Appointed time for an appointed feast. The usage of the verb in Amos 3:3 is illuminating. Can two walk together except they be agreed? So that's like, what I was just saying. They can't go together if they haven't agreed. How are they going to do that? Whether they have agreed on a time or place of meeting or on the meeting itself is ambiguous. The meaning of Moed is fixed within the context of Israel's religion. First, the festivals came to be known as the appointed times or the set feasts. These festivals were clearly prescribed in the Pentateuch, and you can go ahead and read the festivals in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23. The word refers to any festival or pilgrimage festival, such as Passover. So that's what I was just saying. Leviticus 23, the Feast of Fruits, Leviticus 23, and the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Day of Atonement. So when the people had to gather together. Elohim condemned the people for observing the Moed ritualistically. Your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hateth. Isaiah 1:14. So they were doing these feasts out of more so obligation and not out of remembrance. They were doing it because, we have to do this. Let's go ahead and do this and get this over with. And it became more so of a ritual instead of a celebration. The word Moed also signifies a fixed place. This usage is not frequent. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Elohim. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. This was talking about Satan wanting to be above the Most High when he was kicked out. For I know that thou would bring me to death into the house appointed for all living. Job 30:23. In both meanings of Moed, fixed time and fixed place, a common denominator is the meeting of two or more parties at a certain place and time, hence the usage of Moed as meeting. And this is more so on his feast, because you have to meet. Everybody has to come together. It's a holy convocation, a set apart convocation. Everyone is to gather for these feasts and to observe them in remembrance of their various things, right? And so, in order to do that, there has to be an appointed time and an appointed place, or else, how are you going to do it? The phrase tabernacle of the congregation is a translation of the Hebrew Ohe Moed, which is tent of meeting. The phrase occurs 139 times, mainly in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and rarely in Deuteronomy. It signifies that Yahweh has an appointed place by which his presence is represented and through which Israel was assured that their Elohim was with them. The fact that the tent was called the tent of meeting signifies that Israel's Elohim was among his people and that he was to be approached at a certain time and place that were fixed, Yod, in the Pentateuch. In the KJV, this phrase is translated as tabernacle of the congregation. Exodus 28:43. And they shall be on Aaron and on his sons when they come into the tent of appointment, or when they come near the slaughter place to attend in a set apart place, so that they do not bear crookedness and die, a law forever to him and to his seed after him. Because translators realize that the noun Eda, or congregation, is derived from the same root as Moed. Of the three meanings, the appointed time is most basic. The phrase tent of meeting lays stress on the place of meeting. The meeting itself is generally associated with time or place. Coming from H5475, sod, not sure how that's pronounced. Sod means secret or confidential plans, secret or confidential talk, secret council gathering circle. Sod means first confidential talk. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked. So people who get together and they talk about somebody, possibly gossip, or making plans of what they're going to do to somebody. And Proverbs 15:22, without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. So if you're not getting counsel by the Most High, or by, getting good counsel, period, or any counsel, then your plans are not going to come to fruition. It's going to backfire. But if you have good counsel, if you get counsel, you can do things logically if you follow that counsel. Sometimes the word signifies simply a talk about something that should be kept confidential, like between one or two people. If somebody wants to share something they don't feel comfortable sharing with a bunch of other people, that needs to be kept confidentially. Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another. Proverbs 25:9. The word represents a group of intimates with whom one shares confidential matters. O my soul, come not thou into their, Simeon's and Levi's, secret, unto their assembly, mine honor, be not thou united. And this was Jacob when he was giving the blessings to his sons, because Simeon and Levi, they took it upon themselves to redeem their sister from being violated by Shechem, right? And so what they did was they killed Shechem, they killed his father, and they killed all their people. And Jacob felt like he was now a stench to those people. So he doesn't want to be in their council, because Simeon and Levi, they held a secret council together to go ahead and do that and redeem their sister, to seek vengeance. Yaakov wanted no parts of that. Jeremiah 6:11 speaks of the assembly, informal but still sharing confidential matters of young men together. So it says, therefore I am filled with the wrath of Yahuwah. I have become weary of containing it. Pour it out on the children outside, on the company of young men together. For even husband and wife shall be taken, the aged and the very old. And to have sweet counsel, to be in a group where everyone both shares and rejoices in what is being discussed and or done. This is the assembly that I want to be a part of. The gathering that I want to be a part of, where me and other people who are in this group are sharing and rejoicing. And we all agree upon what the conversation that we're having. or what's going to be done. This is what we should want to be a part of. And you can kind of see the difference between the words that are used in Greek and the words that are used in Hebrew. They're very different. We took sweet counsel together. We walked to the house of Elohim in the throng, which is a bunch of people who were also going to the house of Elohim to hear the word that was going to be given. H5712, Ida, which means congregation, or Ada. Yeah, Ada. In ordinary usage, Ada refers to a group of people. It occurs 149 times in the Old Testament and most frequently in the book of Numbers, which they were doing the census and counting all the people. So, of course, there was going to be like a huge congregation. The first occurrence is in Exodus 12:3, where the word is a synonym for kahal, which means assembly. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. The most general meaning of Ada is a group, whether of animals such as swarm of bees, Judges 14:8, a herd of bulls, Psalm 60:30, and the flocking together of birds, Hosea 7:12, or of people such as the righteous, Psalms 1:5, the evildoers, Psalms 22:16, and the nations, Psalm 7:7. So just a group of things, a group of people, just a group. The most frequent reference is to the congregation of Israel, which is used 9 times. The congregation of sons of Israel, 26 times. The congregation, 24 times. Or all of the congregation, 30 times. Elders, Leviticus 4:15. Family heads, Numbers 31:26. And princes, also in Numbers, were placed in charge of the congregation in order to assist Moses in a just rule. So this is when Jethro had came to Moses and was like, hey, you're the one who's judging them from sunup to sundown. You're going to wear yourself out. You need to find righteous men who can also judge like you are so that you can go on about your business. You have other things that you need to be doing. So that's what that's talking about. So just a group of people, a group of elders, the heads of houses, princes, things like that. H6951, kahal, can mean an assembly gathered to plan or execute war, Genesis 49:6, 1 Kings 12:3, and Ezekiel 17:17. It can denote a gathering to judge or deliberate, right? So just is assembling together to come up with a plan of action, right? This is not as far as like coming together to discuss the matters of the Most High and to teach and worship. No, this is like in a boardroom type meeting, like coming up with a plan of action of what we're about to do, right? It may signify an assembly representing a larger group, First Chronicles 13:1-2, and Leviticus 4:13. Sometimes kahal represents all the males of Israel who were eligible to bring sacrifices to Yahweh, which they would have had to have been 20 years of age or older. In Numbers 16:3 and 33, it is clear that the assembly was the worshiping, voting community. The word kahal also signifies all the people of Israel. Lastly, we have H6116, Atzareth, which means a solemn assembly on a festival or holiday. So this would be more so about Yahweh's feast, of us assembling together, coming together in remembrance of the Most High, sharing the word, rejoicing, singing hymns or psalms. It's just a time to be together with our brothers and sisters. So this whole thing about church, the way church is today, has nothing to do with the Most High. And it didn't even have anything to do with him in the New Testament. It was what the Greeks did. They more so worshiped the building instead of honoring and rejoicing in the assembly of us coming together and worshiping the Most High. I hope that this has been fruitful for you. If you have any questions or want me to go deeper into something, please leave it in the comment section and I will try my best, Yahweh willing. And I will see y'all in the next video.